So my original intention for this video was to bring you a collection of post offices, ones that seem to defy the conventional historical narrative. But while I was doing that, I ended up looking at the architect for one of these, and that was this one, the Albany post office, built in 1884. And I thought I would divert my attention to the architect of that post office and many, many others. So that architect ended up being a Mifflin Emlen Bell. And after doing a bit of research, someone I consider to be a placeholder and not an actual true story. I don't even know if the person's true. I looked for a visual of this gentleman who apparently dies at the age of, what is that, 50 something, 61? And this is the only photograph I could find of him. This is from a newspaper clipping from a Chicago newspaper, we're told, looking like a picture of him at boyhood, really. And I would call him a placeholder, because as we look at his catalog in this video, you're going to find the volume of work is ridiculous. Now, they try to caveat that here by telling us that when he worked as supervising architect of the U.S. Treasury Department for 3 years, he had a staff which allowed him to work with all these different styles: Second Empire, Chateau-esque, Queen Anne, Richardsonian, Romanesque. I think, again, this is a very sloppy placeholder backstory for this gentleman. It's also said he worked on the Washington Monument, and his name is supposedly inscribed somewhere on the capstone, so that should probably tell you a little bit about the BS going on behind this story. He has his hand in the Chicago World's Fair, which is another tell, while at the same time, at a very young age, he's apprenticing under another architect, and he's involved supposedly with the construction of this building, the Illinois State Capitol, which they'll tell us was built in 20 years. Very early time period, absolutely ridiculous. Here's a look at it in the modern day in Springfield, Illinois, and then some of the interior. Absolutely breathtaking architecture, really difficult to believe that this fits into the historical timeline that we've been given. Also involved with Iowa State Capitol, another magnificent structure, two of the finest in the states, I would wager, according to, in my opinion anyway. Just a look at some of the interior in the Iowa State Capitol as well, just to give you a sense of what they were able to accomplish in these settings in the mid to late 1800s. So Mifflin Emlen Bell, interesting too in that article, and it really took me a while to find this clipping. Notice how they misspell his name here. Well, to go with the photograph, and at the top they have Mifflin without the E. Absolutely ridiculous. And let's take a look at the works attached to this gentleman's name. So we saw the Albany Post Office. Absolutely ridiculous. And what I've done is I've added the population for these locations at the time, or close to the time they were said to have been built. And I saved a photograph, a modern photograph, if these buildings still stand, which this one still does, and just try to envision all of this going up in such a short time period. So we've got a real hole in the narrative here with the time, and you've got a lot of structures being attributed to this one gentleman who was basically a ghost in our historical narrative. Here's the old Memphis, beautiful post office. Couldn't even find the demolition date on this one. Rochester, New York. Remember, again, this is all from Mr. Mifflin Bell. Boy wonder, I guess. And I guess that would be accurate, because they do say he rises to prominence very early in his lifetime. And I did find a little clipping on this federal building as well, post office / federal building in Rochester. Now I've highlighted a few of the boxes. You can pause and read the entire thing if you'd like. But the general attitude is what I want to highlight, and I don't have a date for this clipping. They mention here, no one's particularly interested in using it, however, because inside it's dark, gloomy, usually uncomfortable, and just plain ramshackle. So they're really downplaying this building. They talk to a judge who resided in there. I'm not in favor of saving it as a landmark, he says, although he admits some attachment for his courtroom. It's ornately decorated in cherry wood and is the building's best feature. He says, blow it up. It's an ugly thing. He's very blunt about it. And then the writer of the article echoes that sentiment. He's right. It is ugly and not particularly interesting inside or out. All things considered, the old pile of stone seems beyond redemption. It should be demolished. This is the media in the region talking about this old structure, trying to get inside the minds of the people who live there and back the demolition of the structure. But it didn't happen. It still stands. You can see here we have the genie-style man lifts doing their work. Our modern technology and how we are able to reach some of the outer areas of these structures in the modern day. And just to add a little context and counter the narrative on that article, here's a quick peek of the interior in this building. You tell me, does it feel dark and decrepit? I think we've exposed a little bit of the lying narrative of the media, even for Rochester, New York. Moving on to Lexington, Kentucky. Again, and you need to look at the dates on these as well. There's a lot of overlap on when these things were constructed, so we have to assume that Mr. Mifflin, of course we're told he had a massive staff, was just pumping out these post offices in all these different regions across the states. Comical narrative, in my opinion. My suggestion, of course, if you're not familiar with the work here I do on the channel, is that these structures were standing for a much longer period of time than what we're being told, and that these are false start dates with false start architects attached to their inception. Frankfort, Kentucky, 6,000 people living there at the time. Still stands, this one. Not looking like it's aged one bit really over that duration. And this was the entire catalog of buildings I could find on Mifflin Bell's Wikipedia page. I'll put that link in the description. I'm sure there are more somewhere, but there wasn't a lot to search. This is attached to this gentleman's name. And any mention I saw of Mr. Mifflin Bell was just echoed from one website to the other, whether it be an architecture website, archive, or Wikipedia. It all seemed to be the same, almost the same wording to the T. Here's the one in Quincy, still standing. Quincy, Illinois. I did a video on Quincy. Council Bluffs, Iowa. 1888, this was their post office, and population 20,000 people living there, yet they built a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, depends on your perspective, 4 or 5 story post office with a tower at top. Demolished it in the 50s. This one really surprised me. So we're looking at Dallas, Texas, 1888, at a time when there's about 30,000 people living there. You have this dual tower post office building that they demolished eventually in 1939. But would you take a look at that? Anyone from Dallas, from the area, know anything about this building? Ever heard of it? Did you even know it ever existed? My guess would be no. I would imagine it's faded into obscurity. Toledo, Ohio, demolished, not sure when. All in this same 5-year time period. These are all going up now, keep in mind. And keep in mind this is happening from state to state, across state lines. How is all the communication being done? How are all the materials being sourced and set up ready for construction? Hannibal, Missouri, population 10,000. Same year, 1888. This one still stands as well. There it is, retaining some of its tech as well in the upper reaches here. Certainly looking like it could be 300-400 years old if I were to tell you that this was somewhere in Poland or Austria. You would have no trouble believing that story. Even the small town of Aberdeen, Mississippi, gets a magnificent looking post office custom house, even though there's less than 2,000 people, or about 2,000 people living there at the time. They have the skill set apparently and the means and resources to build such a structure. Still stands to this day. Carson City, Nevada, very small, 4,000 people, same time frame, making no sense. So I guess the point of the video like this is just to illustrate the absurdity of the historical narrative that we've been given. Because if you're just looking at one structure and you get a bit of backstory on it, maybe there's not enough in there to cast the seeds of doubt. But when you put them together in one place like this, and you attribute them all to a single architect who really we couldn't find a photograph of the gentleman when he was near to the end of his life in the early 1900s, you'd think there would have been something. All we found looked to be a photograph of him at best in his 30s. Not making any sense. Jefferson City, Missouri, 6,000 people. Really, no sign of this one. Demolished. Couldn't find any trace of this one. This is very obscure. Very strange too. Look at this guy. He's apparently stepped out onto the ledge. Get that a lot in these old photographs as well. Macon, Georgia, 1889. Mifflin gets involved. Now, how many post offices is that in the 2 years of 1888, 1899? You can look at that Wikipedia and get a good chuckle. But they tore this down in 1906. And apparently this is what it looked like. Take a look at the difference. So even though it only stood for 17 years, there was enough time in that short period to remove the roof on the tower and remove some of the decoration. I say no. I say this is a systematic dismantling and demolition process of the old world and its construction, getting rid of the evidence. Syracuse, New York. Old post office no longer stands. Tyler, Texas, 1889, same year now. Seems to be long gone. Peoria, Illinois, same year. 40,000 people living there, building beautiful looking structure. Take a look at the 5 arches in the entryway here. Massive columns, very, very thick, very strong looking. Demolished in the 30s. Must have just been getting the technology to be able to demolish these effectively in some cases. Minneapolis, a heartbreaking story of the urban renewal process in Minneapolis. If you check out my video, the structures there just amazing. Over 200 buildings destroyed in 1 year. I think it was 1961 or 1962. Absolutely tragic. New Albany, Indiana. Sorry, same year again, 1889. Take a look. I really like this one too. Take a look at the texturing on the stonework here. Very, very high quality construction. I don't know if New Albany's got... I couldn't even find the population for that. But I don't imagine they had these stone and brick masons laying around. Augusta, Maine. 10,000 people living there. This is the next year now, so he must have taken maybe he took a Christmas break and he got back to the drawing board and built this or drew this up. 1890, Fort Scott, Kansas. Demolished in the 30s. 11,000 people living there at the time. Because it's just so easy to build these turrets on the corner. Keokuk, Iowa. Of course, locals correct me if I'm wrong. I always get the pronunciation wrong. 1890, when there was a population of 14,000 people, they were digging out the excavation apparently for the post office in Keokuk, Iowa, and then building a several-story building with a massive tower on the side. And it still stands and still looking strong and skookum as ever, if you will. Auburn, New York, 1890, the same year. This certainly looking to me like this tower used to be a lot taller. Something has been removed from this tower on the right side is my guess. Denver, Colorado, nice looking post office. 1960, they take this one down. Denver, another city that really surprised me in my research. These types of buildings were once everywhere. We're seeing the Opera House adjacent to the post office here in the background. The old Opera House in Denver. So I suppose I'm killing two birds with one stone in this video, where you're still getting a post office video, a collection of post offices. They all just happen to be designed by the same gentleman, the ghost of a architect by the name of Mr. Mifflin Emlen Bell. Brooklyn, 1892, still stands, of course. Louisville, demolished in 1942. God, that must have been something to demolish. I can't imagine. Take a look at the size of this structure. Look at the columns. Second story columns. Got one. You got a lower. You've definitely got a fenced in lower area here. They had to get rid of this, that's for sure. Fantastic. And they actually did the same thing over time, where they took off some of the old world splendor and dumbed it down before they demolished it. In the drawing here you can see there used to be much more. And a quick little sidebar from the post offices. This is the government building at the Chicago World's Fair that Mr. Mifflin apparently was in charge of. One of several, I think. I couldn't find much more on that, though. Of course, we were told these are all temporary, made out of lath and staff. Basically, paper mache, stucco, if you believe those sorts of things. I certainly don't. We do have a couple of courthouses here, getting toward the end of our file. We have the Sparta, Wisconsin courthouse, 1895. Again, this is busy, man. All of these in less than a decade. At a time when there's 3,000 people living in Sparta, we have this courthouse. And there's a look in the modern day of how majestic these buildings really are and how well they stand the test of time if we want them to. Wheaton, Illinois, courthouse, 1896, built at a time when the population is only 2,000 people. This is one of those courthouses that would have been going up during a depression after the Great Panic of 1893 in small town Illinois. They are building a courthouse apparently that looks like this at a time when there's less than 2,000 people. Yes, we are casting seeds of doubt on the conventional historical narrative, and I hope there's enough here to convince you that something is not right with the narrative. Knoxville, in the same year, same size town. Knoxville, Iowa, sorry, not to be confused with, is it Knoxville, Tennessee? And it still stands. And this one's a bit strange too. First of all, you can see how amazing the structure is. They must have had every man, woman, and child in the town building this. But this is interesting as well. I'm not sure what the function would be there, or what exactly is going on. Unique, definitely. Aledo, Illinois, again, 2,000 people. This one in 1894. And Mifflin really gets around, you got to admit. The guy gets around. Keeps himself busy. I wouldn't say anyone would be accusing him of being lazy in the historical narrative. And then, of course, again, 2,000 people living there at the time, and that's what they built. Port Townsend, now over on the other side of the continent in Washington State. At a time when there's about 4,000 people there. I did a video on Port Townsend. That town will shock you if you were not expecting old world in that region. This is just a taste of the stonework that you'll find on the exterior of that post office. And we're coming to the end of the file, and I just want to remind you that all of these structures were said to have been designed by one gentleman, Mr. Mifflin Emlen Bell, who died at the age of, well, the early age, in his 50s, early 50s, and we only have one photograph available. Didn't even have a painting. Usually they'll give us a painting of one of these guys, but not this time. Marquette, Michigan. Only 9,000 people living there at the time of construction, 1889. Now we're going back. We're adding to that early list of Mr. Mifflin's. And another one demolished in the 30s. And let's get a little closer and just give you a taste of the architecture that was so prevalent in the 1800s, and that most of it had to see the wrecking ball for our 20th century New World revival, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. Nebraska City was a post office. Looks like it's a bank now, Farmers Bank. Nice little structure. Small town. Terre Haute, Indiana. Also did a video on Terre Haute. This one will shock you. Probably had a tower extension on here. This has been flattened. This is a spectacular looking structure, actually. Demolished in the 30s. But built in 1887. I don't know. I just find it absolutely absurd trying to rationalize it any other way other than some sort of intentional destruction going on here. Alright, this is the last one. Humble, yet adding to the list of absurdity with Mr. Mifflin Emlen Bell. So pretty prominent with the post office, did a couple courthouses, a little bit of a World's Fair sprinkling, and a couple state houses are the cherry on top. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this guy was a real person, or do you think we're getting fed a line? This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.